People go missing every day, everywhere in the world, and it's truly sad and disturbing. A lot of these cases are interesting and creepy though, so we're gonna learn about them. It's a good thing to learn about, it's a good PSA to be taught. These do get very creepy though, so make sure that you have a blanket, you have a warm drink, maybe a snack, and let's get into these missing persons cases. First of all, follow my Instagram and join my Discord if you haven't, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel, come on. Thank you, or follow on Spotify if you're on Spotify, and let's get into this. The case of Luke Durbin. Luke Durbin was 19 years old when he disappeared in Ipswich, Suffolk in May 2006. He lived locally with his family and was described as close to his mother and sister. By all public accounts, he was socially active, he had a steady routine, and he maintained regular contact with family members. There was no known history of him going missing before, and there were no documented issues suggesting he ever intended to want to leave voluntarily. His disappearance was considered very out of character almost immediately. On the evening of 11th of May 2006, Luke went out with friends in Ipswich. The group attended Zest nightclub in the town center. Before heading fully into town, Luke had left his wallet, his phone, and some personal belongings at a friend's house. And this detail is important because it meant that once he separated from his friends, he had no money and no way to contact anyone. At the time, leaving items behind may not have seemed significant, but as we'll see, it later limited the ability of investigators to track his movements through phone records or bank activity. The nightclub closed in the early hours of the 12th of May 2006, around 3 a.m. At some point after closing, Luke became separated from his friends. CCTV footage captured him alone in Ipswich town center. This footage provides the only confirmed records of his movement that night. He was seen attempting to access the railway station, but trains were no longer running at that hour. Later, he appeared near a taxi office. Reports indicate he did not have enough money to pay for a taxi fare. CCTV then shows him walking alone along the bus station area of Ipswich at approximately 4 a.m. This is the last confirmed sighting of Luke Durbin. After that moment, there is no verified visual or digital trace of him, ever. Roughly 9 minutes after the final confirmed sighting, CCTV cameras captured a silver or light-colored Volvo driving near the same area. The vehicle was later found to have been using false or cloned number plates. Police have repeatedly referenced this car as significant to the investigation. However, there is no public footage showing Luke actually entering this vehicle, and authorities have never actually really confirmed a direct link between him and the car, but it's been very heavily mentioned in these files. I guess it was a theory the cops had. The presence of false plates on the vehicle kind of say that there was like deliberate concealment by whoever was driving, and that elevated the vehicle's importance in the case, I'm assuming. When Luke failed to return home, concern grew very quickly. His family reported him missing, and Suffolk police launched an investigation. Officers reviewed extensive CCTV footage from Ipswich town center and surrounding areas. Searches were conducted locally, including checks of nearby waterways and locations where an accident might have occurred. Because Luke had left his phone and wallet behind, investigators could not rely on call records, bank transactions, or digital tracking to extend the timeline. There was no activity after the 4 a.m. sighting. From the start, investigators were working with a very narrow window of confirmed movement. Luke was last seen alone in a populated urban area with functioning CCTV coverage, yet after that final recorded image, there were no witnesses, no confirmed sightings, and no physical evidence indicating what happened next. After the initial search efforts in May 2006, the investigation shifted from immediate response to something more long-term. With no confirmed sightings beyond 4 a.m. and no physical evidence recovered, police had to consider multiple possibilities at the same time. The early years, and yes, I said years of this case, were defined by theory testing and elimination. One of the first possibilities examined was accidental death. Ipswich has waterfront areas and docks not far from the town center. Investigators considered whether Luke, possibly intoxicated and without money for transport, could have fallen into water. Searches of relevant areas were conducted, however, no body was recovered, and no clothing or personal efforts or effects linked to Luke were found. While accidental drowning is a common explanation in late-night disappearances, the lack of any kind of physical evidence or items made it impossible to confirm this, or even proven to really fully believe it. And then over time, this amount of lack of anything substantial weakened this theory, but it didn't fully eliminate it. Another early consideration was a random attack. Luke was alone in the early hours of the morning. Opportunistic violence statistically is more likely during those hours, particularly involving intoxicated individuals, drunk people. In late 2006, Ipswich actually became nationally known for the murders of 5 women by the killer Steve Wright. Because of the timing and location, speculation arose about whether Luke's disappearance might somehow have been connected. However, police never actually linked Luke's case to Wright or the Suffolk serial killings, at least not publicly. There's been no evidence placing Luke in contact with that offender, and investigators have treated the cases completely separately. For several years, the case remained unresolved without major public developments. Then in 2012, Suffolk police made a significant move. 2 individuals were arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with Luke's disappearance. This marked the first time the investigation actually formally escalated from missing person to suspected homicide in any real or public way. Both individuals were later released without charge. Police did not disclose detailed evidence behind the arrests, nor did they even clarify what led to this suspicion. The absence of charges against these people kind of showed that there was insufficient evidence to proceed, but it was good because the arrest signaled that authorities were seriously considering foul play as a likely explanation. At some point after Luke vanished, a reported sighting emerged from Woodbridge, a town not far from Ipswich. A witness claimed to have seen a young man matching Luke's description in a vehicle the following day, and that he appeared distressed. This account was later investigated, but it was never proven or substantiated. No physical evidence supported it, and no verified cameras or anything confirmed his presence. And then because of this Woodbridge sighting was pretty big at the time, but it remained speculative and just unconfirmed. Over the years, Suffolk police have reviewed the case multiple times. It has been handled as a long-term major investigation rather than a closed file though. Periodic appeals for information continue, especially around anniversaries of his disappearance. Age-progressed images have been released to reflect what Luke might look like as an adult. The case has also received media attention through documentaries and true crime podcasts, so I guess I'm late to the party a little bit, but it's not been talked about that much. It does have a following though. Several key questions remain central to this investigation. One is why Luke left his wallet and phone behind. It may have been careless, temporary, or just simply part of the normal flow of the night. However, that decision significantly ruined the investigation. It limited investigative tools. There were no call records, no financial transactions, and no GPS data to extend the timeline. Everything stops just at that final CCTV sighting. Another unresolved issue is the narrow time gap between Luke's last confirmed appearance and the nearby CCTV capture of the Volvo with false number plates. If foul play occurred, it likely happened quickly. The presence of cloned plates suggests intentional concealment by someone, but there's no publicly confirmed evidence that Luke entered that vehicle again. Without forensic connection, the connection remains circumstantial but concerning. Still concerning. One of the most difficult aspects of this case still years later is just that there is absolutely no physical trace. There have been no remains discovered, no confirmed discarded clothing, no weapon recovery, and no forensic evidence publicly disclosed. Disappearances in busy urban environments with CCTV coverage typically leave some form of trace, but in this case there is nothing beyond the final recorded image. Based on available evidence, 3 general scenarios to this day are considered the most plausible. The first is opportunistic abduction. This theory is supported by the suspicious vehicle and the rapid nature of this disappearance. Its weakness is the lack of direct footage, witness testimony, or forensic proof connecting Luke to a specific suspect or vehicle. The second here is accidental death followed by non-recovery. This is supported by the late hour and the possibility of intoxication, being drunk. Its weakness, though, is the extensive search efforts over years and the complete absence of any remains nearly 2 decades later. I mean, while bodies are sometimes just not recovered, it becomes very statistically less likely over long periods in these contained environments. And then the third is voluntary disappearance. This theory has very weak support, but it can't really be disproven either. There's been no financial activity, no confirmed communication, and no credible sightings everything suggesting that Luke began a new life. In addition to that, family members and investigators have always consistently treated this as unlikely. As of today, Luke Durbin remains officially missing. There have been no confirmed death certificates and no closure for his family. The investigation remains open. The case continues to be one of Suffolk's most enduring unresolved disappearances. And I want to say right now, before we move on to the next one, that my heart does go out to all these victims and their families. This is all horrible. Next up, we're gonna talk about Carly Gousse's disappearance. Now, I don't know how to pronounce this. I've heard people say Carly Gousse. I don't know if it's that or Carly Goose or Carly Husse, but we're just gonna go with it. I'm sorry, I couldn't find anything in particular or anything exact. Carly Gousse was 16 years old when she disappeared in the early morning hours of October 13th, 2018. She lived with her father and stepmother in the White Mountain Estates area of Chalfont Valley, a small rural community in Mono County, California. The area is quiet, spread out, and surrounded by open desert. Highway 6 runs nearby, and beyond the paved roads, there's a lot of wide, empty terrain. On the evening of October 12th, Carly had been out with friends. According to statements later given by her stepmother, Carly smoked marijuana that night and came home acting very anxious and paranoid. It was described as a sudden shift in behavior. She reportedly seemed frightened, was asking if she was going to die, and appeared confused. Those details come from family accounts, but they did shape how people understood the case from the beginning. After returning home late that night, she stayed inside with her stepmother for several hours. It was still dark outside. At some point between roughly 5:30 and 7 a.m., Carly left the house on foot. She did not take any money. She did not take a jacket. She was believed to be wearing a t-shirt, jeans or sweatpants, and Vans shoes. And for that area and time of day, it's really not ideal clothing. Desert temperatures can swing sharply, cold before sunrise and then warming quickly when the sun comes up. Multiple witnesses later reported seeing a teenage girl matching Carly's description walking along White Mountain Estates Road and near Highway 6 that morning. One sighting placed her walking south of Sierra View Road, east of the highway. These sightings are important because they confirm that she left the property and was moving through the area alone. After those reports, there are no verified sightings. When she did not return home, law enforcement was notified. The Mono County Sheriff's Office began a search operation, and this was not any small effort. Ground teams covered desert terrain around the home and along Highway 6. Search and rescue teams were involved. Helicopters were used to scan from the air. Search dogs were deployed. Volunteers also joined in. The search stretched across multiple days and covered a wide radius. The desert landscape around Chalfont Valley matters a lot here. It's open, but it's also uneven. There are washes, brush, rocky areas, and wide spaces that can look empty from a distance, but still conceal things. Heat and dehydration can become serious quickly once the sun rises. At the same time, the area is not completely isolated. Highway 6 has vehicle traffic, so from the start, investigators had two major possibilities. She continued walking into the desert terrain, or she encountered someone along the roadway. Despite the size of the search effort, no confirmed physical evidence was found. No clothing and no belongings, no remains, no clear trail leading to a final location. There was no phone data to follow because, similarly to the first case, she left her phone at home. There was no bank transactions, and there was no social media activity after she left. After the first few days of searching, the case shifted from active rescue to long-term investigation. The search area had been covered by ground teams, dogs, off-road units, and aircraft. No confirmed physical trace of Carly was found in that surrounding desert. At this point, investigators were left with pretty much nothing. A narrow timeline, a few witness sightings near Highway 6, and no hard evidence. One of the main possibilities from early on was exposure in the desert. Carly left before sunrise without supplies. As the morning progressed, temperatures would have risen. The terrain around White Mountain Estates include open land, brush, and uneven ground. If she kept walking away from the road and into more remote terrain, dehydration and heat could have been serious within hours. That theory makes sense geographically. At the same time, search teams covered a a large area. Dogs were used, air support was used, and nothing was recovered. Desert conditions can make recovery difficult, but the lack of any trace at all has kept that question open. Another focus has been her mental state that night. Family statements described paranoia and fear after marijuana use. It's been suggested that she believed something was wrong with her physically. There has never been any public confirmation of any other substances being involved. Marijuana reactions can vary, especially in teenagers, and panic responses can definitely lead to irrational decisions. It's also possible that she may have been laced with something. It's possible she left the house still feeling anxious or disoriented, and that doesn't explain where she ultimately went, but it may explain why she left at all. There's no public record showing a prior mental health crisis or issue, but the behavior described that night became central to how the investigators framed this timeline. Because she was last seen walking near Highway 6, the possibility of encountering someone has also been considered. It was early morning, but vehicles do pass through that highway. If she accepted a ride or was approached by someone, that could explain the sudden stop in sightings. There's no confirmed witness who saw her enter a vehicle. There's no known CCTV footage capturing an interaction. No suspect vehicle has been publicly identified. Law enforcement has not announced evidence of abduction, but they have not ruled it out either. Another big part of this is that public scrutiny became a pretty big aspect of this case fairly quickly. Online discussion centered on the timeline inside the home before she left, mostly. Some people questioned details in public interviews. That scrutiny has never resulted in charges, though. Law enforcement has not publicly named any family member as a suspect. The case is still open, and investigators have continued to say that all possibilities remain under review, quote unquote. So internet suspicion and official findings are definitely two separate things, and no public evidence has confirmed any wrongdoing inside the home. Over time, the investigation has included renewed appeals for information. Age-processed images have been released to show what Carly might look like today. Law enforcement has encouraged anyone who may have been driving along Highway 6 that morning to come forward if they remember anything unusual. The FBI has listed her case and continues to accept tips. Several key questions still shape the case. Why did she leave without her phone or belongings? How far did she actually walk after the last confirmed sighting? If she went into the desert, why has nothing been found? If she encountered someone, why has no witness or physical evidence ever surfaced in the years since? Next up, we're going to be talking about Ben McDaniel. Ben McDaniel was 30 years old when he disappeared on August 18th, 2010. He was originally from Tennessee and had been living in Florida for a period of time. He had a background in real estate, and around the time he vanished, he was reportedly dealing with financial problems and the aftermath of a divorce. Those details would later become part of the larger discussion around the case. But on the day he disappeared, what mattered most was that he was an experienced scuba diver who had been spending a lot of time at one specific location, Vortex Spring in Ponce de Leon, Florida. Vortex Spring is a freshwater diving site that attracts recreational divers. What makes it different from many open water dive locations is the underwater cave system connected to the spring basin. Once a diver enters the cave, they are in overhead environment. That means there is no direct access to the surface until they exit the same way they entered. Cave diving is widely considered one of the most dangerous forms of diving because of tight passages, limited visibility, and the risk of disorientation. It requires specialized training far beyond basic scuba certification. Ben had been diving at Vortex Spring repeatedly in the weeks before his disappearance. It was known that he had shown interest in entering the cave system. Some reports suggested he did not hold full advanced cave certification required for deep penetration into certain sections of the cave, and that detail later became important because the deeper sections contain narrow restrictions that are physically very difficult to navigate. On August 18th, 2010, Ben arrived at Vortex Spring with his dive gear. Witnesses saw him preparing for a dive. He entered the water and began a solo dive. Diving alone inside a cave is generally discouraged because there's no partner available to assist you in case of emergency. At some point during that dive, another diver reportedly saw Ben inside the cave system. That diver later exited safely. Ben did not. When Ben failed to resurface, concern began to grow. His truck was still parked at the site. Personal belongings were left behind. There was no sign that he had packed up and left. That suggested he had not simply walked away from the property. The assumption quickly became that something had happened inside the cave. Search efforts started relatively quickly. Local authorities were notified and experienced cave divers were brought in. These were not casual divers. These were highly trained professionals used to navigating dangerous cave systems. They entered the underwater tunnels and began searching for any sign of Ben, his body, his equipment, anything that would indicate where he had gone. The search teams penetrated deep into the cave system. Areas that would require significant skill to access were explored. According to search accounts, no body was found. No trapped diver was located. No clear sign of entanglement or collapse blocking the path was confirmed in the sections that were searched. For a confined underwater cave, the absence of evidence became the central issue. If Ben had died near the entrance, he likely would have been found quickly. If he had been found stuck or become stuck in a reachable section, recovery would have been expected during those early dives. Instead, the cave search produced nothing definitive. From that moment forward, the case became centered around one question. If he entered the cave and never came out, why wasn't he there? After the initial cave search failed to locate Ben's body or gear, the disagreements really started to become apparent in the case. So, inside the Vortex Spring Cave system, there was a steel grate installed in part of the passage to limit diver access to deeper sections. It wasn't a solid wall, but it did restrict movement. Some divers later said Ben had been squeezing through an opening in that grate during previous dives to access tighter areas beyond it. Those deeper areas contain narrow restrictions, sections where a diver has to remove tanks or compress their body to pass through. That kind of diving is extremely technical and dangerous. So that debate, the disagreement focused on this. If Ben went beyond the grate into one of those tight restrictions, could his body still be in there? Some experienced cave divers argued that the system had been searched thoroughly enough that he would have been found if he were inside the main accessible passages. But then other people pushed back against this and said that there were parts of the cave systems that are so tight or unstable that they really can't be safely searched without serious risk to the rescue divers. In those spots, visibility can drop to zero instantly if, like, silt is disturbed. Movement becomes extremely limited. If someone became wedged in a tight restriction, recovery could be nearly impossible. This disagreement was never fully settled. The diving community remained divided on whether the cave explanation was sufficient. There was also a lot of tension between Ben's family and the owner of Vortex Spring. The family fully believed strongly that Ben died inside the cave and that not every possible section had been fully explored. They wanted continued search efforts. The site owner, along with some divers, believed the searches had been extensive and that the likelihood of him still being in reachable portions of the cave was low. That disagreement kept the case active and public for years. At the same time, another possibility began to circulate, that Ben may not have died in the cave at all. In the months leading up to his disappearance, he had reportedly been dealing with financial stress and personal issues following a divorce. Some people suggested that the dive could have been used as cover for a staged disappearance. The idea was that leaving his truck at the site and entering the water would create the assumption of a fatal accident, allowing him to start over somewhere else. It's a good theory, but there are problems with it. There's no confirmed financial activity that occurred after he vanished. No passport usage or documented travel was discovered. No credible sightings were verified, and staging a disappearance in a dive environment would also require coordination and planning, and there's no public evidence that such preparation ever occurred. But that theory is still one of the main theories in the overall discussion, simply because the cave search didn't produce a body. Foul play has also been mentioned, although there's no actual evidence supporting a homicide, at least publicly. There is no confirmed sign of a struggle at the surface, no suspect has been identified, law enforcement has not announced evidence of violence. The location itself was a dive site, not an isolated wilderness area with no witnesses at all. That makes a secret surface altercation more difficult to imagine without someone noticing. The central issue continues to be the cave itself. Cave systems are contained environments, but they are complex. They have restrictions, side passages, silt buildup, and unstable areas. Strong water flow can move debris. Decomposition underwater can be unpredictable. Aquatic scavenging can reduce remains over time. Even so, the idea that a diver disappears in a defined cave system and is never located remains unusual. As of today, Ben McDaniel is still missing. No remains have been recovered, no definitive conclusion has been reached, the investigation has never resulted in any criminal charges, his family continues to believe he's inside the cave system, but no one really knows what happened to him. Next up, we're gonna talk about Robin Graham. Robin Graham was 18 years old when she disappeared on November 15th, 1970 in Los Angeles, California. Her case is one of the better known hitchhiking disappearances from that era, and it's remained unsolved for over 5 decades. Robin was living with her family in Los Angeles at the time. That night, she asked her mother for permission to hitchhike to a friend's house in Northridge. Hitchhiking in 1970 was common and socially normalized in ways that would seem reckless today. Teenagers regularly accepted rides from strangers. It wasn't considered automatically dangerous back then. She was dropped off near the intersection of Topanga Canyon Boulevard and Ventura Boulevard around 8:30 p.m. Witnesses later reported seeing her hitchhiking. At some point, she got into a car with a young white male driver, and that was the last confirmed moment she was seen alive. Multiple witnesses described the vehicle as a light-colored car, possibly a late-model Dodge or Plymouth. The driver was described as being in his early 20s with sandy or light brown hair. A composite sketch was created based on witness descriptions, and it looks like this. The next day, Robin did not return home. Her family reported her missing. Police began investigating, interviewing witnesses, and reviewing the vehicle description. A search of the area did not produce physical evidence at all. No confirmed sightings occurred after she entered the vehicle. Over time, the case became associated in public discussion with the rise of serial offenders operating in California during the 1970s. However, no confirmed link has ever been established between Robin's disappearance and any identified serial killer. Her case predates several of the more widely known California serial crimes of that decade, and law enforcement has not officially connected her disappearance to any solved homicide series. Years later, investigators re-examined the case multiple times. Suspects were looked at, including individuals who resembled the composite or owned similar vehicles, but none were definitively tied to Robin's disappearance, and still no remains have ever been recovered. One of the main challenges in Robin Graham's case is how little physical evidence there is. The timeline is extremely short and simple. She was hitchhiking, she entered a stranger's car, and then she was gone. There were no phones, no surveillance cameras, no digital trails. Once she drove away, the investigation depended almost entirely on eyewitness testimony, and just people's memory, so there's pretty much nothing. Next up, we're going to talk about Elodia Ginescu. Elodia Ginescu disappeared on August 30th, 2007 from Brasov, Romania. She was 38 years old, a practicing lawyer, and married to a man named Cristian Chiosa, who was a police officer. They even had a young son together. By the time she vanished, their marriage had reportedly deteriorated, and there were claims of conflict and tension between them. And that context became central once the investigation began. When Elodia failed to show up for work and could not be reached, concern grew quickly. Her disappearance was reported, and attention soon focused on the apartment she shared with her husband. Investigators conducted forensic testing inside the home and later stated that they found blood traces in multiple areas. Some of that blood was reportedly clean, but forensic methods such as luminol were used to detect what authorities described as cleaned up bloodstains. Prosecutors later argued that the quantity and distribution of blood indicated a violent assault had occurred inside the apartment. They claimed that the blood belonging to Elodia had been found on flooring, furniture, and other surfaces. Forensic reports presented analysis in court suggesting that the blood patterns were consistent with serious injury rather than a minor accident. This became one of the most important pillars of the prosecution's case. Her husband, though, Christian, maintained that he did not kill his wife. At various points, he suggested that she may have voluntarily left or staged her disappearance. The defense argued that the blood evidence did not conclusively prove death, and that the case was built on assumptions. The absence of a body became the defining issue, because no remains were ever recovered despite searches. That's a theme with this video. I didn't even mean for that to happen, but over time, additional circumstantial elements were presented by the prosecutors. They argued that Christian's behavior after Elodia disappeared was suspicious. They also examined phone records and movements around the time she was last seen. Investigators proposed that after the alleged killing inside of the apartment, her body was removed and disposed of in an unknown location. However, no confirmed disposal site was ever identified. The case became extremely high profile in Romania. Media coverage was constant. Television programs discussed every development in detail. Public opinion became intense, and the case remained in the spotlight for years. It was a huge story. In 2013, Christian was convicted of Elodia's murder, despite the fact that her body had never been found. The court accepted the forensic blood evidence and circumstantial findings as sufficient proof that she had died and that Christian was responsible. He was sentenced to prison. The conviction rested largely on forensic reconstruction and the conclusion that the blood loss indicated a fatal injury. Elodia's remains have never been recovered. Legally, she is considered deceased based on the court ruling, but I included her in this video because there is no physical recovery of her body. This is an insane case. And we're at the end of this video, guys. Thank you for watching so far. Please follow or like. I appreciate it so much. Let me know what you want to see in the next videos. Have a great night, everyone, and sweet dreams.